He found her where the valley bent inward, where the air buzzed faintly, and the ground still steamed as if embarrassed by what had fallen onto it. She was lying half-conscious, tangled in metal that kept folding in on itself and then giving up, as if even the wreckage knew it had failed. When he approached, she tried to lift her head and failed with dignity that felt entirely unnecessary for someone bleeding into the dirt. "Don't move," he said, immediately realizing how useless that sounded to someone who clearly couldn't. He knelt anyway, talking because silence felt dangerous. "I'm not a doctor, or a soldier, or anyone helpful really, but I do have water." Her eyes opened, sharp despite the pain. They scanned him, calculating, measuring threat and outcome. Then they stopped on his face as if confused by it. "You're unarmed," she said, her voice strained, accented in a way he couldn't place. "Emotionally." "Very," he replied, holding up his hands. "Physically also, yes." She noticed his gaze flicker to her ears, long and elegant, unmistakably not human. Her jaw tightened, waiting for fear, revulsion, the usual sequence. Instead he said, "Okay, so that's new, but I've had a strange week." He carried her to his shelter with more determination than skill, apologizing every time she hissed in pain, and once when he tripped over nothing at all. She remained silent through it, conserving strength, filing away every reckless detail of him. The lack of caution, the absence of reverence, the way he muttered encouragement to himself as if that helped. When he set her down, he immediately began arguing with his medical kit, which was winning. "This is supposed to seal wounds," he said, shaking a device that sputtered and emitted a small puff of smoke. "It's sealing something, possibly the air." She laughed before she could stop herself. The sound surprised them both. He froze, stared at her, then smiled like he'd just accomplished something significant. She turned her face away, annoyed at her own weakness. As he worked, her body betrayed her secrets in small ways. Wounds knitting faster than expected, skin resisting tools not meant for her biology. She masked it with groans, insults, and one pointed complaint about his cooking, which she hadn't tasted yet but felt confident criticizing. "You're bossy for someone who crashed into my valley," he said. "I did not crash," she snapped. "I was attacked. By gravity." She almost told him who she was. The words pressed hard against her teeth. Empress, Warbringer, the blade the galaxy feared. Instead she said, "By enemies." "Well," he said, handing her a cup of something warm and questionable, "you're safe here. I don't get many enemies, mostly dust." Outside, the sky carried signals he couldn't hear and alarms he couldn't imagine. Somewhere far away, fleets searched and empires held their breath. Inside the shelter, a human man adjusted a blanket and told a wounded alien woman not to worry, because worrying made things worse. For the first time in centuries, she almost believed it. She woke to the sound of something beeping in an offended, irregular rhythm. For a moment she thought it was a battlefield alarm, the kind that meant shields were failing and someone important was about to die. Then she realized it was coming from the corner of the shelter, accompanied by the human's voice. "No, you don't get to do that," he muttered. "You worked yesterday, take today off." She opened one eye. "Are you threatening your technology?" "I prefer to call it negotiating," he said, not looking at her. "It responds better to tone." She tested her body cautiously. Pain was still there but dulled, pushed back further than it should have been. Her biology had done more overnight than she had intended. She pulled the blanket tighter, annoyed at herself. "You should not talk to machines," she said. "They learn bad habits." "That explains a lot," he replied. "This one learned disappointment from me." He finally turned, noticed she was awake, and immediately launched into unnecessary cheerfulness. "Good news, you slept. Bad news, I may have poisoned breakfast. The middle news is, I don't know which is which yet." She watched him move around the shelter, unguarded, back turned, humming something painfully off-key. Anyone else would have been dead 3 times over by now. The galaxy's deadliest warrior lay on his cot, hiding behind sarcasm and silence while he worried about soup. "You should leave me," she said suddenly. He paused. "Is that a royal thing? because I don't really do orders. I am dangerous, she said. It was the truth trimmed of context. People die near me. Statistically, he said, tasting the soup and grimacing, people die everywhere. She almost smiled. Instead, she focused inward, suppressing the surge of strength that wanted to rise. Outside, faint signals brushed against her senses, search pings coded pulses. Her people were looking. Her enemies too. Time tightened around her like a blade. He brought her the bowl anyway. Eat, he said. Or don't, but if you don't, I'll worry, and worrying makes me annoying. You are already annoying, she said. See, progress. As she ate, her hand brushed his by accident. The contact was brief, but her instincts flared, ancient and lethal. She crushed them down, heart racing at how close she'd come to reacting. He noticed nothing, already talking about how he ended up on this planet because it was quiet and didn't ask questions. She wondered when she had last been somewhere that did either. Outside, engines whispered at the edge of the world. Inside, she listened to him complain about his life, his mistakes, his very unimpressive ambitions. For the first time, hiding felt less like strategy and more like shelter. The first tremor rattled the shelter just as he was arguing with a panel that refused to open unless struck gently and insulted creatively. The second tremor did not bother with subtlety. She felt it before the sound arrived, felt the air tighten, felt the world bend around descending mass. There was no more time to pretend. "Stay here," she said, already sitting up. He blinked. "That's usually my line." The walls hummed, lights flickering as something vast and deliberate settled into orbit overhead. His instruments, which normally complained about dust and weather, began screaming with enthusiasm. "Okay," he said slowly, staring at the readings. "Either a city just parked above us, or I finally broke reality." She stood, and this time there was no weakness to hide. The pain retreated, obeying her will. Power flowed back into place, precise and terrible. He stared at her like someone watching a familiar puzzle rearrange itself into something impossible. "I need to tell you something," she said. He sighed. "Please don't say you're married." "I am the Empress," she said, "and they are here for me." Silence stretched, then he nodded. "Right, that makes sense. I was guessing accountant." The ceiling split open as figures descended, armored, disciplined, deadly. They froze when they saw her standing unrestrained, weapons lowered in unison, knees followed. The galaxy exhaled. She turned to him, bracing for fear, anger, betrayal. He just folded his arms. "You could have mentioned that earlier." "I did not think you would keep helping me." "Well," he said, "that explains the healing thing, and the ears, and the attitude." Her enemies' ships retreated without a fight. Her forces waited for orders. She gave none. Instead, she looked at the human who had seen her at her weakest and offered soup. "I will return," she said, "but not as I was." He scratched his head. "So, visit sometime. Try not to conquer the valley." She smiled.